Okay, so dynamic transport. So the gist of it is this. I'm going to play this track. See if you tell me if you can hear it. It's Nora Jones. Can you all hear that?
Yes.
Okay, so what happens with the normal transport as opposed to dynamic transport inside Pro Tools is if you make a selection in the timeline with the idea that you just want to, loop it for a while, which you often do for whatever reason, in order for you to create a different length loop, you have to stop playback. So let me see if I can reproduce that here. I'll make it a little bit shorter. So I want to loop this selection here, and let me make sure that loop playback is on. Yes, it is. Okay, so if I change the loop length while playback is starting, is engaged, it will still loop the same spot that it did previously. That loop's playback selection will not change. If I wanted to play the new selection, I have to hit stop and then play again, and then it will play the new loop length, unless you go to dynamic transport, which is this here, and this will allow you to change the loop size or loop length. So it's looping, and sure didn't work, huh? Let's try it again. Now if I take this length, as soon as I let go, it'll play the new loop length. It's going to finish this one and then go back. Sure it isn't, no. If you make it shorter, I guess not. I didn't realize that. Okay, so if you make it longer, it will update. But if you make it shorter, it will do it as long as you're not past the So interesting behavior. I think that the reason you might want to use that is if you're trying to identify a loop in a song, and you're doing something like this where you go, okay, I'm going to try to find a perfect loop here. Whoops. Let me blow that track up. I'm just going to make a selection here, blow it up. And I'm going to tab to transient to that first downbeat. And I'm going to make a guess that this is about 2 bars.
Sorry, what? Tab to transient?
Tab to transient, yeah. So this is really handy for making loops. Tab to transient is right under, almost in the upper left corner, the magnifying glass. See that button up there?
Yeah.
If that is disabled, tab key, I'm going to make an edit here and go backwards just a little bit. If I have that disabled and I hit the tab key, the cursor will move to the next clip boundary. And then I hit it again, it'll take me to the next clip boundary. Or if I've got space in there, and I click in the middle and I hit tab, it'll take me to the beginning of the clip, hit tab again, it'll take you to the end of the clip. So it basically lands on every clip boundary, which is sometimes handy, right? You can make selections with that too. So if you wanted to make a selection that is exactly the length of these 3 clips, you could hit tab, take you to the beginning of the first one, and then just hold shift and tab again, and it will allow you to make a selection exactly on, clip boundaries. But tab to transient will allow you to not only tab to clip boundaries, but also transients within a clip. Right now, this is the kick track. Transients are pretty bold. They're, easy to grab. So if I hit the tab key now, it's going to take me to the clip boundary, and I hit it again, it should take me to the next waveform.
Oh, you haven't got the button enabled.
That's right. You got to have it on. It helps if you have it on. So tab, clip boundary, tab to the next waveform. So this is really handy for identifying beats or loops. So I'm going to hit undo and undo all of those clips that I just created. I'm going to hit tab to transient to get to that first downbeat, and then I'm going to eyeball it. That looks like about 2 bars right there. But let's just say it wasn't so obvious, and I wasn't sure exactly where 2 bars is going to be. Let me do 1 bar so we don't have to sit through it all. If I go right here. Waited till I saw the sun. Waited till I now if I hit tab to transient. Waited till I saw the sun. Waited till it will update, the playback will continue to, update the new selection that I've made, and I can just do shift tab, repeatedly until I get the perfect loop that I'm looking for, if that makes any sense. Was that a completely diluted?
Dynamic playback on you to do that?
What's that?
Dynamic transport, you have to have that turned on.
Well, you don't have to have it on. If you want the playback to update to the new selection length, then you have it on. The problem with leaving it on is if you, oftentimes during playback, I'll go somewhere else in the timeline and I'll put a fade in or do, tweak something while I'm listening to playback. So you can kind of multitask, listen to something and do something else. If you have dynamic transport, you can't really do that, because as soon as you start playback, it will oftentimes jump to a new location, and it didn't do it right there.
That was my second part of my question. Is you say, why don't you just leave it on? But now I understand.
Yeah. So let me try this. I left you by the house of fun. It's not doing it. There we go. Now that's changed, right? So now if you wanted to jump to a new location, you actually have to click up here in the dynamic transport ruler, which only exists when you have that enabled. So if you turn that off, let's see. It's doing the same thing. Looks like the behavior of that has changed a little bit. Used to get calls every once in a while. During playback, you'd click somewhere else in the timeline, and the playback would immediately jump to that location. And if it was recording at the time, it would bail out of record and jump to a new location, which doesn't appear to be the case anymore, which is a good thing. But anyway, dynamic transport just makes it a little bit easier to find loops, selection lengths that you want.
Now, John, if I may jump in, just
Sure.
That little tab to transient button you hit that's just next to the 5 up there. Do you mind if we just go straight across all the way towards the counter or the thing and just go over those buttons there? I know that one of them is the loop thing that you played, that you hit. The next one from tab transient. And then maybe you could describe why they look like they do, those insignias, what they mean. And
right. Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. What does that button do?
And also, what's the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Okay, well, let's start to the left then. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, so, what is that too? I have no idea exactly.
And how come I don't have that visible in my window?
If you go to your I think you can get it up here too. View, edit window, views. No, it's not there. You got to go over to the edit window view selector, the upper right corner of your edit window. Okay. And those are the zoom controls. Oh, okay. You may or may not have those visible. I like to have those visible. And then, of course, I normally have all of this stuff visible. Ableton Link is new. I don't use that. I do like to use expanded transport. And this is basically my normal setup. This will work if you have a large screen. If you have a laptop or a smaller screen, it may not all fit in the at the top. So you can show or hide different things that you want. But the transport section is what those buttons are. So in this little zoom control section, so you've got the left arrow and the right arrow. If you click and drag, you can do kind of an accordion zoom, right? either one of these left or right arrows. But if you click on them once, it's the same as the R and the T key. You know how you zoom in with R and T, zoom in and zoom out. It's the same as that, but the difference is if you click and hold and drag, you can.
Sorry, click and hold on you put your cursor in the
on either of this right facing arrow or the left facing arrow. Click on and drag on either one.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And you can zoom in and zoom out that way, which is kind of nice sometimes.
Good one.
And or if you click on them once, you know, it'll kind of it will do exactly what the R and T keys do. So if you hit R and T on your keyboard, if that's not working, make sure this A to Z button right here is lit. The timeline A to Z button, and then R and T will zoom in and zoom out. I use that quite often, R and T. The buttons in the middle are zoom, you know, vertical zoom. So waveform, if you want to see the waveform larger or smaller, you can do that. This is not impacting the gain. This is purely visual only. So maybe you've got some, you know, audio waveform like right here. You see something going on in there, but you want to get a better view. Something's in there. You can blow up the waveform and, you know, just zoom it in, but it will not increase the gain. It's not like clip gain. And then the other button is the same thing for MIDI notes. So if you've got a MIDI or instrument track, oops, let's see, there we go. And you've got some MIDI notes in there. Oops, no, I got to click in the instrument track. This button will make the MIDI notes larger or smaller. So you can kind of expand the MIDI notes to be a little more visible. And you can click and drag on those as well. And same with the waveforms. If you click and drag on the waveform zoom, you can do that. The problem with that for me is, you know, every once in a while you want to go in there and look at the waveform a little bit zoomed in if you've got something that's recorded at a really low level. But I tend to want to go back to like the waveform height that is actual representative of the volume. So I'll double click on the magnifying glass. If you double click on that, it'll do two things. It'll reset all of the waveforms to their actual size based on their, you know, recorded volume, and it will take everything in the session, the farthest thing out at the end, and it will, you know, zoom out to fit it all into the to the timeline. So if you want to make sure you've got everything in view, double click on the magnifying glass. So that's the top half of this.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Thank you.
But when you double click, it puts it all back to normal.
Well, it won't change track height. So if I have the tracks really large, it won't fit the tracks in vertically, but horizontally. So if let me just copy a little, I'm going to give you an example here. So this session, all the tracks are exactly the same. So it's not a good example, but if I copy a piece and I put it way down here at the end of the timeline and I'm zoomed in over here, and I want to know, you know, what's going, is there anything else downstream? Double click on the magnifying glass, it will zoom out to include everything in the timeline. The timeline is 24 hours long. Some people, you know, if you're doing especially TV, you might be hours long of you know, material, and you want to zoom out to include it all so you can see it all. Double click on the magnifying glass. Now the shortcut to fit all the tracks vertically into the view is on a Mac, it's Control Option Command down arrow.
Control Option.
All three, the 3-finger salute or the claw, or there's all kinds of names for it.
Command Control Option.
Which down arrow, on the keyboard or on the screen?
No, down arrow on the keyboard. Sorry. Yes, Control Option Command down arrow.
And what does that do? That just fills your window?
So like right now, I set all the track height to large, right? So I can't see them all without zooming up and, you know, scrolling up and down. But if I want to resize all the track height so that I'm looking at all the tracks without having to scroll up or down, Control Option Command down arrow. and that brings everything into view.
I just did something that turned my entire screen upside down.
Wow. Wasn't there another click that you could at the top of, or a corner, something that you could click it and everything would come on to would do exactly what you just did?
Maybe, I don't remember. Let's see.
It's like clicking on the top of something.
I don't remember that.
Sorry,
one.
I don't either.
If you think of it, let me know. I want to know.
All right. Well,
I'm curious now. Okay, so that's good. So we went through the zoom horizontal, zoom vertical. The 1 through 5 is just presets, zoom presets. So if you click on those actually correspond to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on your keyboard in the numeric. I'm not the numeric, but the alpha, the QWERTY portion of your keyboard. So 1. Well, no, it's not. There it is. Yep, I had to click in there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are just zoom level presets that you can use. I don't use them very often, but I suppose they're handy.
Is that something you can program, or is it just preset and that's
No, you can. That was a perfect segue. Thank you. So if you wanted to create your own kind of zoom level preset, let's say you wanted to go down to like sample level, which I think 5 is pretty close, but it's not dead on. Let's click right here in a waveform. 5, yeah, that's pretty deep. That's, if we make a selection here, that is, let's see how much time that is. That's one sample right there. So that's number 5 is, how often do you need to do that? Not very often. So if you wanted to zoom out a little bit, maybe not all the way down to a single sample, but maybe a little bit zoomed in, but not quite that much. If you want to update or change any of those on a Mac, it's Command. If you Command click on it, you'll see that number 5 blink. And now that zoom level is stored as one of the 5 presets. So you can change them to whatever you want. Command click on them on a Mac. Read, check the Windows. What is it? Maybe Windows key, click on them to update it. If you see it blink like that, you'll know that it stored the new. Reed, are you the only PC user here?
I think so. What is it you want me to do?
See if you can update one of these 5 presets. Try clicking on one of the 5s with Windows. Hold down the Windows key and click on one of those 5 zoom locators or recalls.
One stayed the same. I did one. Should I try Control or Alt next?
Try Control. It should blink if it updates. See how? Watch this number 5.
Yes, it blinked.
With Control?
Control click, yeah.
Okay, Control click on Windows, Command click on a Mac will update those presets. Zoom level presets. Okay, so that's the zoom section. To the right here, this button, north, south, east, west, that's zoom toggle. That's the E key. So if you make a selection on a track and you want to blow it up, have that track height, expanded to fill the screen, hit the E key. That's one of my favorite shortcuts. I use that all the time, 1,000 times in a day. E. Whatever you've got selected, it will take that selection and fill the screen horizontally, and vertically it'll take the track height to whatever you've got set up in your preferences, which by default it's fill to screen, which or fit to window. It's too large. I set my zoom toggle, which is in the Pro Tools Preferences Editing tab over here in this zoom toggle section. I set the track height to extreme, but it's totally up to you. Click OK, and then whatever you've got selected, you hit the E key, or you click on that little button right there, north, south, east, west, and it blows it up. And then hit it again, and it takes it back. So I use that shortcut quite often. The one below that is tab to transient. We did that already. Give you a quick example of that. Here's tab to transient enabled, and it's just taken me from one kick drum hit to the next. It's based on whatever track or tracks you have your cursor parked on. So if I do this, let's see, option, go large, and I bring my cursor down across a couple of tracks here. Let's see how it behaves there. It's going to hit the first waveform. So there's a little bit of a snare hit there that it picked up, snare, and then that looks like snare bottom a little bit later, so it picked that up. I don't know what it's grabbing there. There's another snare. So it just takes you through each waveform, transient, which is helpful.
You know how standard shift tabs in reverse? You know, if you're in a Windows program, you know, like in a, let's say, word editing, you know, program, shift tab to transient actually selects that area, and when you tab again, it selects the next. You know, it includes, well, you try it. You can explain it better than me.
If you want to make a selection based on transients, is that what you're talking about? Tab to the first one, hold the shift key, and then just tab again.
Oh,
And it selects more.
And it will make that selection, you know, extend that selection to the next boundary. The other thing too is you can do it backwards. So for example, maybe the cursor was not here and you go, oh, you know what? That's the downbeat. I need to include that in the selection. Shift option tab will take you backwards. Or option tab on a Mac. On a PC, it might be.
No, it's shift option. It's shift option tab. It's not option tab.
Well, option tab takes the cursor back. If you hold down the shift key, it will extend the selection. So
Okay,
sometimes you just want to take the cursor back, you could go option tab.
Gotcha.
But if you want the selection to be included, add the shift key. Shift key is the same thing, right? If you want to, you have a selection that you just want to extend, you can hold down the shift key and you know, click and drag and make it go as, you know, wherever you want it to be, either on the front end or the back end. So that's tab to transient. This button here is the link, timeline, and edit selection. This one is, I don't use very often. I wish you could lock it on because every once in a while it creates a problem. I think we might have talked about this not
All
too
right.
long ago.
Can you just say what it's called again, that button?
Link, timeline, and edit selection.
Okay.
So if I have that turned off, it allows you to have a selection in the timeline and a different selection in the ruler. So if I start playback right now, I would expect it to play right here, but it's actually going to play over here because this is the ruler selection. So if you ever start playback and you're like, wait a minute, I keep clicking here and it's not starting playback at the location I want it to, it's because this button right under the magnifying glass is probably disabled.
And what would you use that for? Like, how would that be useful?
There's a couple of examples. I think the example where I might use it myself would be, let's say that I am working with, could be audio clips or it could be MIDI notes. Let's see, I'm going to go to grid mode and go to bars and beats. And let's say I've got a 2-bar selection that I want to play around with some MIDI notes within that selection, and I need to, that's too far. Let's go back out. Let's go 2 bars. Grid mode. Okay, so I'm going to turn it on right now so that I can make my selection, and it's going to loop that area. And I'm going to solo that. And I wanted to add some MIDI notes. MIDI notes. Here's my put B3 organ in there. Nora's gonna love it. I know it. And I'm not a keyboard player, so I have to pencil notes in, or I could hammer them out on my keyboard. This is gonna. All right. So if I go in and draw a note right now, I lose my selection, and if I stop playback, my playback will start at that note. So if I want to spend some time here and manage notes and kind of manipulate them a little bit, I would go back. First of all, I lost my selection, so I'll go edit. Oh, I wasn't able to restore it. So let's just recreate it. Go 2 bars. And I'm going to set my grid value to 1/8 notes. So I've got a 2-bar selection. I'm going to deselect the link timeline and edit selection. And now I can loop and I can, draw in new notes if I want to. And anything I do in here, if I stop playback and start it again, it's going to keep playing on that 2-bar loop regardless of where I put my cursor in here. So it'll give me the flexibility to kind of tweak notes or audio clips or whatever without losing that that nice 2-bar loop that I'm going on. I use it occasionally, not very often. So that's one example. The other example might be where you have especially like video, and you've identified a location in the video where a sound effect or something should land at a particular location, and you've identified where it should go first, and you go, okay, it's supposed to land right there, and you want to bring it out on a track, this sound effect that you've brought into the session. Let me bring in a new audio track. But maybe the audio clip needs a little bit of tweaking. So if I go into, I'm just going to bring something out here, and I've got the spot identified. Whoops, let me do this. There it is. I'm going to turn it off, the link timeline and edit selection. I'll bring the guitar track in, and I don't know where exactly the clip is that I'm going to grab. I'm going to make a selection there. That's the bit that I want. I'm going to hit Command T to trim it. And now I can easily spot it to that location. If I do, let's see if this shortcut works. Control. No. There's a shortcut that will spot it right to that location. And I forget what it is. But I can manually do it. And then I go, okay, you know what? It still needs a little bit of trimming. I'm going to go to slip mode and clean this clip up. This is a, whatever, I don't know, door slam or footsteps or whatever. And I can, manipulate that clip without losing the exact location that it was supposed to go. I don't know. Not something I use very often, but that's another use of it. Those are the 2 uses that I can think of. And that's why I say those are kind of rare. I wish if that thing gets turned off, it just creates this kind of weird, unpredictable behavior. And every once in a while I'll get a phone call from somebody. It's like, yeah, playback keeps starting way down at the beginning and I'm down at the end. It's that button. The link timeline and edit selection, this one right here. The next one I use all the time. This is the link, what is it called? It's called link track and edit selection. Thin line between link track and link timeline. What this does is it ties the cursor with the selected track. So if I click on this track with the cursor, it's now selected. And vice versa. If I click on the kick track, it'll move the cursor up to that track. I use this often for like drums. You go, okay, I want to put an EQ on all the drums. You just click and drag and then do Shift Option EQ. And that allowed me to select those tracks very easily and then apply an EQ to just the selected tracks. Here's the EQ for each one of the tracks. So that one I use quite often.
And that's if you want to put the same plugin on all the tracks.
Well, I mean, that's one example. If you want to put the same plugin, if you want to create a send on those tracks, if you want to change the output of those tracks, if you want to put those tracks in a particular automation mode, I want to resize just those tracks. I'll do Shift Option Medium. Now, just those tracks have been increased in height only. and I want to put just those tracks in automation latch mode. I'm holding Shift Option. On a PC, it's Shift Alt. Now just those tracks are in latch mode. All the others are still in read. So Shift Option is quite powerful to do a variety of things, but you have to select the tracks first, and that little button is one way to do it. I mean, another way to do it is just, click on one and then shift click on the other. But sometimes I find it's just easy to go, oh, I'm already here. Let me just click and drag and make the selection and then do whatever it is I want to do. So there's a bunch of things that you can do with the Shift Option function. Now I'm going to do Option and turn them all back to read. Okay, read automation. All right. That's link, track, and edit selection. This one, this one generates a lot of calls too. This is the insertion follows playback. It's the N key. N is in Nancy. Al, did we talk about this one? Somebody was.
Yeah, that button was the bane of my existence for many months.
Yeah,
over years, at least a full couple months.
Right. So the behavior there is if I plant my cursor there and I start playback and I hit stop with the button not enabled, the cursor will go back to the place where I started playback, right? And if I turn it on, the cursor will land at where I stop playback. So if I hit play and then stop, and then the cursor will update to the location where I stop playback. This is completely dependent on what you're doing. Like if you're recording, especially for like audio books or whatever, and you want to stop and then you want to start from that position and keep recording and then stop and then keep recording again, you would want it on so that it continually goes on. But if you're, over re-recording a certain section over and you're not happy with it, or you want to try something different in that exact same location, then you would want to turn it off so that when you do the record pass and you hit stop, it goes back to the exact same location. So there's instances where on or off is very appropriate. The tricky part is it's N. N is in Nancy on your keyboard is what turns it on and off. And it's really easy to fat finger the N key when you hit the space bar and change the status of that button. So it throws people off. How the heck does that keep changing? It's probably because you're wildly hitting the space bar.
This was one that I looked up because I wanted a pause button. So when that's on, it acts like a pause button. I wanted to stop where I stopped and then continue on from there again, as in pause.
Right. Okay. Yep.
Confounding thing is that
I was looking at the transport controls and I'm like, there's no pause. How can I,
no time for pause, man.
No time for pause. Exactly.
There will be no pause here. So that's that button there. N key. N is in Nancy. Depends on what you're doing. Sometimes you want it on. Sometimes you don't want it on. And remember, it's the N key that accidentally turns it on or off. The button here to the right, I always leave it on, and that is automation follows the clip. So if you had an audio clip, if I write automation on a clip, I'm going to put this track. It's silent, so we don't have to listen to it. I'm going to put it in touch, but I'm going to switch over to volume automation playlist, right? So it's in touch mode. When I start playback, I'm going to go all the way to the beginning. Well, maybe not that far back. And when I grab the volume and change it, it will write. As soon as I let go or stop touching, it will stop writing. It'll go back to the existing underlying automation. Whereas Latch, now if I keep it in touch mode, it'll play back and it will read the existing automation until I touch that parameter, and then I can update it and write new or update the existing automation. So touch is kind of handy if you just want to do little tweaks or large tweaks. It doesn't matter, I guess. Whereas Latch is a little bit different, where it will do the same. It won't write until you grab the parameter, but whatever level you let go, it'll continue to write at that level. And I'm not touching anymore. So it's not touch based. It will start writing when you touch it, but when you let go, it'll continue writing at that level. And if you want to punch out on it, you command click on the Latch button. So this is kind of aimed at control surface, where you've got a bunch of faders and knobs and stuff, and you can put a bunch of tracks in Latch mode and, you know, punch them in and out at will. So you don't have to keep your hands on the faders for the whole duration of the time. You can go, okay, let me grab those drums, find the level that I like, leave them there, and then I'll go grab, you know, whatever else. And those will continue to write at that level that you left them. So that's touch and Latch. Write mode, I don't recommend that you use, because as soon as you go into playback, it starts writing. If you have any existing automation, it's going to overwrite it. Kind of dangerous to me. I wouldn't use that.
And what is touch latch? That's the combination of the two?
Yeah, touch Latch is touch on the fader, but Latch on pan and sends and everything else. So a perfect example would be if I had two mono audio tracks, and they were, you know, two audio files that made up a stereo pair, and maybe I wanted to let's see, let me get rid of those over there. I'll bring them up in the mix window. It's a little bit easier to see. Now it's like I'll put them both in touch Latch, and start playback. And if I grab a fader and I let go, it'll go back up. But if I grab the pans, like I want to hit those hard left and hard right, those are Latch, and I don't have to sit there and ride them the whole time. But now I can go down and grab the faders. So the pans and sends and everything else is in Latch mode, but the fader is touch mode.
And you have to have the transport rolling while that's happening, or you just do it with it stopped?
Good question. All right, we're going deep. If you have Pro Tools Ultimate, and you go into mixing, allow Latch prime and stop. It's not a very good definition of what it's doing, but you can write automation when you're parked. So you could put, let's say, these faders at this level. Can't remember what the shortcut is. Okay, let's say I want to just, for this duration of time, I want these faders to be all the way down. And I want to write that as automation, edit, automation, write to current. And it wrote the, whoops, I should do write to all. I'm kind of skipping over it because this is a topic we should probably spend a lot of time in, because it's kind of good. Write to all enabled. Now within that selection, I'll go over here to volume. I want to have the faders up at full volume or 0. Oh, that one's already down. I'm going to take that one down and this one up. And I don't want to have to play through the whole time. I'll just hit edit, automation, write to current, and it allows me to write a new level to a section. And I don't have to do it during playback. But there's more to that, and we should spend like a whole chunk of time on that, because there's some other really cool stuff, glide automation and auto join, but those are functions of Pro Tools Ultimate. So if you don't have Pro Tools Ultimate, you probably won't see these features down here. So anyway, I'm going back now. I'm going to go back to this, clear that out. Here's the clip that I created, and I have volume automation in the clip, right? Over the clip. This button, I'm going back to the buttons. That's automation, right? So if that is enabled, if I move the clip from one location to another, the automation will stick with it. which is normally what you want, right? If I have that turned off and go to waveform and move this and or duplicate it and go back to volume, the volume automation that I had written on there did not stick with the clip. There's a few.
Is that the primary function of that button?
That is it. And it's orange, basically telling you, hey man, watch out. You're not, your automation's not following. So if it's, I can't think of a good reason. I mean, I'm sure there is off the top of my head. I can't think of a good reason why I would not want that on. If I write automation on a clip, it pertains to the audio within that clip. Kind of unlikely, not always, unlikely that that same automation might apply to any other clip that I put in there. So I'm going to undo that, go back, turn it on, switch over to waveform, and then I can move it, duplicate it, and go back to volume, and that same automation will be included in each instance of that clip.
Hey, John?
Yeah.
When you moved a clip and you had the button off, the automation stayed in that area. Could you superimpose another clip over that automation?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the point.
The answer is always yes.
The answer is always yes.
Yeah.
Anything you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's that button. This button is mirrored MIDI editing. And cool feature sometimes. I'm going to do a very abbreviated example of this. I'll do a 1-bar selection and go to grid mode. Let's say you've got a, you know, whatever, a 1-bar, 2-bar, 4-bar, whatever loop that you've created of MIDI. And you've got some MIDI notes in there. Maybe it's a drum beat or a, who knows, whatever, it doesn't matter. And you have duplicated it. I'll go back to clips view. There's my clip, and I want this to loop out several times. So I'm just going to hit Command D. Whoops, got to select it first. Command D. I've duplicated it, I don't know, 6 or 7 times. And then you go, oh, you know what? It would be cool if we had one more note in there. If I have the mirrored MIDI editing on, we go to notes view, I draw in a note, it will be added to every duplicate instance of that clip. So this is handy for a lot of reasons.
That's cool.
You don't always want that though. You know, sometimes you'll want to add a note to a particular instance of the clip, but not all of them. So mirrored MIDI editing will allow you to update a whole series of MIDI clips, but they have to be exactly the same name. So like, right.
Is that only for the notes, or is that for every other aspect of the, you know, is that for the in automation or volume or, you know, whatever you pan, all that kind of stuff?
Pertains only to the MIDI parameters. So, but let's check it, right?
Oh,
so
within MIDI, I'm saying, like, yeah, there you go. Okay, so
yeah.
It works with everything, volume.
Right. Yep.
Velocity, as you just demonstrated.
Velocity, but it's not messing with the first one now because I changed it with a single note with mirrored MIDI editing off, and it incremented the clip name to instrument 104. But any instance of 103, which I have several of, it will change. Now, if I did this, copied this, and pasted it down here, and had another instance of that, then it would apply there as well. So I could change.
It doesn't work with MIDI volume.
MIDI volume is not working, huh?
Well, it doesn't look like it has that same effect where it
oh yeah
on everything.
Yeah, MIDI volume is based on the track, it looks like. Yeah, so it's not applying there. Yeah, that's a track-based function, not a note or clip-based function. So yes, does
Same
not
thing
work there.
MIDI mute as well, and does not work there either.
Yeah. Again, that would be I guess a track-based function as opposed to a note or a clip. But that's good to know. I had never tried that before. So that's mirrored MIDI editing. this last button here on the right is layered editing. And I can't think of a whole lot of examples of why. I mean, I get it, but it wasn't a big problem for me. But also, apparently it was an issue for some. So I'm going to copy this clip. I'm going to paste it over here. I'm going to zoom out. Oh, and I decide, you know what, I'm going to move it. I moved it to another location and it left a hole there where I placed it. Or better yet, maybe I want to trim it out. And then later on I go, you know what, that's too much. Let me trim it back. Well, it didn't do it that time. Yeah, see, it left a hole. If that is enabled, I can move the clip and it doesn't leave a hole. If I turn it off, it will leave a hole at every place I drop it.
Wow.
So when and what situations might you want to use this?
Good question. I don't know. No, I think the one example might be if you were trimming clips and you wanted, both these two adjacent clips to remain adjacent without leaving a gap between them. And this is a bad example because I don't have audio on this side. But, if I wanted to avoid leaving that hole, I'd have to come over here and trim that. But the easy fix for me is I would just, instead of trimming this one to the right, I'd trim this one to the left and accomplish the same thing. So there's it wasn't a huge problem for me, but
I always keep that one off because I want the holes. I want nothing, get rid of the noise and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah, there's instances where you definitely want the holes, excuse me, but instances where you don't, you're like, you can move things around and maybe experiment with placement or whatever. I don't know. Like I said, you can effectively erase an entire track by just moving a clip up and down it with it off the long way. So the easy way to fix all this, if I delete that and make a selection, heal, Command H will fix all of those gaps, put it back to its original state. All right, so that was
the buttons.
End of the buttons, at least those buttons.
Except for the shuffle, slip, spot, grid.
Shuffle, slip, spot, grid. Okay, those are good ones. All right, so slip mode is basically allows you to place your cursor, make selections, or move a clip. If I create a clip here, without constraint. And when I mean constraint is those vertical lines. Currently, my grid is set to bars and beats, eighth notes. So slip mode, I can put this clip wherever I want to. Doesn't matter. It's got no constraint. If I go to grid mode, then the movement of this clip will snap to that grid boundary. Selections that I make will adhere to those grid boundaries, or dropping your cursor will land on one of those grid boundaries. So musically, it's very handy oftentimes to use grid mode in eighth note, quarter note, or even bars. If you want to make selections of 8 bars kind of quickly, you can go to grid mode, set it to bar, and kind of click and drag and make selections based on bars and beat, or bars in this case. But not always. Like vocals, not really handy to edit in grid mode. You want to go into slip mode so that you can edit and tweak and select whatever you want.
But the grid mode's only really effective if the music was tracked with the metronome, right? I mean, if it was just somebody was tracking without a metronome, it wouldn't really fit to a grid anyway.
Right. Yeah. If you didn't track to a click, or you didn't create a tempo map.
I think creating a tempo map prior to tracking or after tracking.
You could do it either. Well,
that's a good subject for next time, by the way, tempo maps.
Okay, tempo map. We did that not too long ago. We can do it again. Al, you're a big fan of tempo mapping, aren't you? Oh, you're Leslie now.
Yeah. She should get some credit too.
That's right. So yeah, grid mode is only helpful if you've got, bars and beats, they played to a click, or you've created a tempo map after the fact. But it's also helpful for TV and film. You want to edit based on frame boundaries. You could go to time code and set the grid to 1 frame. Handy to edit to picture on frame boundaries. Let's see what else. So yeah, most TV and film, they'll operate with a time code ruler or counter, and then set the grid to frame or whatever, 5 frames or whatever. Or if you want to make a selection exactly seconds based on 1 second, there's a 1 second grid. So there's a few different reasons why you might want to use grid mode. There is another available mode of grid. There's absolute and relative, but let me see if I can make this work here. Let's go to a grid value of half note. Okay, I'm going to cut that. Whoops. See, I've got this clip right here, and the grid, the note is clearly before the grid, but it's a nice pickup. It's a to the downbeat. I don't want to snap this clip to the beginning. Maybe I could trim up the beginning if I wanted to, but I want that note's position relative to the grid to remain there, but I want to move it to another location. If I go to relative grid, whoops, I can move the clip and it will maintain its relationship to the grid. So I moved it to the next grid location, and it offset it by the same amount. So this is handy for pickups or notes that come in a little bit early. If you were to, snap the whole clip to the grid, it would offset everything else and make it out of time for the duration of the clip. So relative grid is handy. This applies to MIDI too. So especially piano players that, you hit a chord and not all the notes are exactly on the same time. Maybe one note's a little, or 2 notes is a little bit ahead of the beat. You can move that clip and maintain that, slightly advanced or late relationship to the grid. So that's grid mode. One thing to point out for slip and grid, if you...
Oh, quick question about the relative.
Yeah.
So when you move that, so everything still stays absolute as far as the placement in time, and it snaps to the next grid location, wherever you want to move to the next grid location that you snap it to?
Yeah. See how here's the grid line right here, and the note is well ahead of it. I'm in relative grid mode. If I move it to the next grid, just for the sake of demonstration, here's the grid line, and the same offset is applied to its location at this new spot as it was to the old one. Whereas if I was in absolute grid, if I move this clip, it's going to be the front of the clip that snaps right to the grid. And now if that was a pickup, I've based the whole clip's, location on that pickup note, not on the bulk of the clip, if that makes any sense.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lifesaver there.
Yeah, trying to nudge something in place. Does it sound right? No, yeah.
Wow. Yes.
This will eliminate some
headaches.
Some headaches, yeah. So grid and relative grid. So if you just click on it, it will toggle back and forth between those 2 modes, or you can press and hold and select which one you want. Let me make a selection here and heal that up. So if I make a selection in either slip or grid mode and you hit the delete key, the result is an empty space, the duration of the selection that you made. And oftentimes you want that. Shuffle mode is a little bit different. If I make a selection and I hit delete, everything to the right is going to advance forward by that selection amount. And sometimes you want this and sometimes you don't, because this is now going to impact everything to the right of this edit.
Just on the track you're working on, not on any other tracks in the session.
Yeah, this is based on the track or tracks that the cursor sits on. So if I want to apply this to multiple tracks, which sometimes you do. So from an arrangement standpoint, you might want to do that. You could say, okay, let me click and make a selection across all tracks from bar 1. Let me go to grid mode. Oh, let me do a fancy grid shuffle mode.
Oh boy.
Wow.
Section.
Oh, you're right.
Versus when we get rid of a verse.
Now I can make a selection based on a grid, but when I hit delete, it'll shuffle everything forward.
Huh. But you can use that without grid mode too, right?
You can use it without grid mode, and then the selection that you make is whatever, click and drag on the tracks that you want, or you could come up here and go bar 16 to bar 20, enter, and then however you choose to make the selection. I want the selection to be 8 bars, and I want to shuffle just those 8. So now I'm just chunking out 8 bars. And everything's going to move forward. Now, in this example, the tempo map has no correlation to the song. So this would create complete havoc on this.
I think shuffle is the coolest button and the scariest button at the same time.
It absolutely is. It really is. And they made it red, not like it's this big, huge, siren or anything, but it's a little indicator like, hey, watch out. Anything that you do, you're going to have an impact downstream here. This not only applies to, deleting, but also editing and trimming. So if I were to, let's see, I'm just going to copy this and place it in here. If I decide I wanted to trim this piece out, it pushes everything down.
Oh.
Right? Yeah. So from a trimming standpoint, it's equally as dangerous too, or good. I mean, you may want to do that. You want to keep the piece to the left and the piece to the right exactly where they are. You don't want to overwrite them. It will just push things aside.
So that would be useful if you had a song with one verse into the chorus and you wanted 2 verses and you grab another verse and just wanted to duplicate it over and then
totally
awesome
arrangement.
Super arrangement. Yeah, so you could do a shuffle grid and you could make a selection, let's say based on bar 9 to bar 18.
How do you get shuffle grid happening at once? Do you press option?
Shift click on them.
Shift click.
I never did that before.
How about shift click, slip, and grid?
Yeah, let's try it.
That's a
you
new
can
dance.
do slip and grid. You can do slip and grid. You can do shuffle and grid. Oh, you can do spot and grid too.
What?
We'll get there.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know. I can't think of examples why you'd want that, but we'll figure it out. So let's do this. Bar 6. No, I want to do start at bar 16, and I want to go to bar. I want it to be 8 bars long. I don't want to do the math. So I've got a selection. And that's my first verse, let's say, and I want to duplicate it.
How did you just go down like that when you selected all the tracks down? It was over in the side there. Everything got selected.
I have the A to Z button lit, and P and semicolon.
Slow down. A to Z button. Where's the A to Z button?
Right here. The A to Z button in the timeline.
I don't see it. You put your cursor on it again? I'm just not seeing it.
Right here?
I don't see your cursor.
Oh, am I off the side? How about
there? There, okay, sorry. Yeah, okay.
So is this part not visible if I go over like this?
No, we can see it.
You can see it? Okay, so here's the A to Z button. There's 3 of them, right? There's one here in the clip list. There's one down here in the groups list, but there's the main one is in the timeline. You want to make sure that one's yellow, it's lit. And when it's lit, there's a whole bunch of keyboards, E for expand and all that stuff. But semicolon will take your selection down and P will take it up. And if you hold the shift key, you can extend that selection up. So right now I want to make sure that I include all tracks.
So that's a semicolon P or a semicolon. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. P semicolon takes the selection down and P takes the selection up.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
One thing that Warren told me that really helped me was he just told me get one of those skins labeled my keyboard. And I have a skin and it's got all everything in there.
Yeah.
What's a skin?
Well, you can get a keyboard that has these shortcuts printed on the keys, or you can get, they call them a skin. It's like a little very thin rubber overlay, and it's a fraction of the cost of a full keyboard. You can get them for, I don't know, 30 or 40 bucks or 50 bucks, something like that. And it just lays over your existing keyboard, and it has a lot of these keyboard shortcuts on them.
Yeah, back in the day, they used to give you a bunch of stickers to put on your keyboard.
That's right, the stickers. Yeah,
I still have my old keyboard from my Mix Plus system that has the stickers on the.
Well, that's it. Those are exactly the what the keyboard or the skin has is what those stickers are. Yeah, and then they would get all dog-eared and the old stickers. Yeah, that's funny. I haven't thought about that in a while. Okay, so shuffle mode. So I'm going to extend this selection down to cover all tracks and up. Oh, I got to make sure all tracks are visible. Let's do that. Resize them all. P. Okay, so that's my first verse, and I want to duplicate it somewhere else, or I want to remove it. Let's say I want to pull it out. I'm in shuffle mode. I'll hit delete. All the track is going to move forward by 8 bars, and then I can jump to another location. I want to push it in at bar 40, let's say. And I have to make sure that my cursor now in a new location also includes all tracks, which it does. And if I command paste on it, it didn't do it. Why did it not do it? Let's go back. Okay. Oh, because I hit delete, not copy. So let's do this. Cut. I'll do command X to cut it, and then go to bar 40. And then paste. So it removed that selection from the beginning, closed the gap where it was, and then I moved the cursor to a new location. It inserted it in there. It pushed the tracks out by 8 bars and copied the piece in there. So it was a selection, cut with shuffle mode on, locate to a new location, and then paste with shuffle mode on. And this reminds me of another request that I hear every once in a while. It's like, my track starts at the very top of the session. How do I put some empty space at the beginning? If you make a selection of the amount of space that you want, let's say I just want to add 4 bars. You go to edit menu, insert silence, but you got to make sure that the selection includes all tracks. And you can push the track down. You go, oh, you know what? We need a count off at the beginning, or I want to add a little intro at the beginning or whatever. You can push all of the tracks forward.
I actually have a question. Conversely, how do I remove a bar at the top of the tune? Because a lot of times I do a roll of a bar, and then when I really have my tracking done, I want to get rid of that bar. I throw a bar in there as a countdown bar.
Same way. So let me insert the silence. And then let's go, okay, cool. I got all this space at the beginning. So earlier I made a selection and then extended it up and down. That's one way to do that. But an easier way to make a selection across all tracks is by clicking up at the top ruler, click and drag. And now I know that selection is made across all tracks, and shuffle mode and delete.
So simple.
The one thing you have to watch out for, though, is if you've got markers.
Oh.
Or you've got, let's say, I don't know, a tempo change.
Sure. You have to include all that.
Yeah, you have to include that. So if I want to get rid of this space, or if I want to insert space, either way, I can do that, but I have to make sure that I include the marker ruler. So I'm holding down the Shift key and I click in the, well, before I do it, let's just do this. I'm going to go to grid mode and from bar 5 to the beginning. If I hit delete in shuffle mode, all the tracks will move forward, but the markers and the tempo are not going to move, and that creates a problem. Now your markers are no good anymore. So I'll hit undo, shift click in the marker ruler, so it's included as part of the selection, and then also in the tempo ruler, shift click there. Now when I hit delete, the tempo and the markers will move with the audio.
Yep.
And same thing with insert. So if I insert it, I don't have a selection made. I have to make a selection of time, and I'll do whatever, 7 bars. I have to include the marker ruler. Whoops, it's already included because I was there. Let's uninclude it, exclude it. That's what I should say. 7, return, and shift click in the markers, shift click in the tempo, and anything else you've got in here, you know, meter or chords, whatever, you want them all to move. You have to shift click in each one of those and then insert silence. Where is it? There it is. And then the markers and the tempo will move with it.
Nice. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Okay, where were we? We were talking about the modes, right? So slip, grid, shuffle, spot is pretty straight ahead. If you want to spot a clip to a particular bar and beat or time code location or minutes and seconds based on either the beginning of the clip or the end of the clip or the sync point. Maybe it's an audio file that has a hit in the middle of it that you want to spot at a particular location, and it's this kick drum right here. I'm going to turn this into a clip, and I want to spot it based on that kick drum. I'd hit tab to transient, and then I think under clip it's identify sync point, and on the clip it will add a little teeny triangle at the bottom. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Right here. And that is the sync point. Now, if I click on this, I can spot this clip based on the start time or that sync point, and it knows that I created a sync point there. So it's going, oh, you probably want to spot this based on that sync point. So that field is highlighted. And then, or the end, if I want to spot it, you know, the end of the clip to a particular location, I can do that. So that's the modes: shuffle, slip, spot, and grid. You can change them with the tilde key right under the escape key in your upper left corner. You can toggle through.
Tilde key. I never knew that was called a tilde key.
Or I guess it's apostrophe. No, what is the other?
No, it's not a hyphen. No.
I don't know what that is. That key. That's one way to do it. Also F1, F2, F3, and F4.
So spot is primarily used for TV and that kind of production, right?
I would say predominantly, yes. I mean, unless you know you want a clip that's going to start, you know, and it's trimmed up and you want to go to a particular location. I don't know. I'd probably use grid mode if I was doing a music thing. Now I've totally killed this session. Do not save.
Do not save.